Hello and welcome again to my series of The Pain and Pleasure of Living a Life on Purpose. My name is Philippa Ross. I'm Chief Enthusiologist Officer for philippaross.com. And I'm joined today by the gorgeous Pat, who is a joyologist who used to live in New Zealand, but now she's hopped across the water and living in Australia. She reminds me of a cat dressed in like with a monarch butterfly skin, because she's had number of experiences. She's using up her 9 lives that she's got, but she's really good at metamorphizing the pain that she's endured and creating pleasure and enabling others to move on. Hello, Pat. Lovely to have you with me.
And you know, I was reflecting earlier on how long I've known you, and I think it's since about 2001 or 2002 when we very first connected.
Well, I moved to New Zealand in 2004, so it must have been quite...
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Around then. Yeah.
Yes. And a lot of water has gone under the bridge since then, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Awesome. So let's start off as to why you moved from New Zealand to Brisbane, are you?
I had a period of 12, 18 months, not very well last year, the last 12, 15 months, and no family in New Zealand.
Right.
And, you know, it was a very difficult time, very lonely, very isolating. And I was really sick, and I really came to see, you know, a couple of things got to shift, and the 2 things were my health and family needed to come up the top. And so I talked to my son and just said I'm going to come home, and effected that change just before Christmas.
Awesome. So have you found what you were looking for moving?
Yeah, look, I think I know my health has improved.
Awesome.
Like, it was coming good by Christmas, but it's improved tenfold since, and still a way to go, but I'm quite confident now. When you're surrounded by love,
yes,
you know, all the other comes into place.
Absolutely.
And to, you know, be woken up in the morning sometimes by my grandson who's 4, who'll poke his Batman doll over the bed or something, or, you know, arrive with a book to read, is wonderful. And, you know, the climate here is very agreeable. Auckland does get damp.
Right.
And that didn't do my joints any good either. So, yes, I think so. And it took a little while for the adjustment.
Yeah.
But things are starting to fall into place now, and not necessarily in the order that I thought they would.
Never does.
But, you know, I've put my boat in the river and I'm going with the flow.
Fantastic. Well, there's nothing like the pure joy of a young child to actually ground you. I actually posted something on Facebook this morning. It was a compilation of babies giggling, and you cannot help but smile inside and out when children, their laughter, and they are just in that moment, you know, and it's like, never mind the fact you're in a deep sleep, but, you know, my toy is really important. Morning. Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. So would you care to share, because I know that you've been through a lot, could you share what your line of work is, and the pain that you've endured and how it's helped you get to where you are today?
Yeah, my work has evolved. I was initially a registered nurse for 6
Right.
years. Travelled Australia on a 5-year working holiday. Didn't know what I wanted to do, and ended up with my own video production company. And then since 2001 have, I created the Joyology model and stepped into that. So I deliver a range of programs to help people find joy when it appears there's none, to move through grief and loss, and to make meaning and find purpose as a result of loss, to use humour and being good humoured to manage pain,
Yeah.
to, you know, shift their perceptions so that people manage the stressors of life. It's been my experience that, you know, life is going to continue to happen. So the constant in our life is ourselves,
Yeah.
and we can't change that, or not much anyway. But we can change this. So in shifting our perceptions, we can have a whole different experience.
So how does a nurse go how do you go from a nurse to being a video production and being a joyologist?
Well, I wanted to be an artist.
Right.
Through high school, I excelled at art. I'd get 100%, and sewing. And, you know, I so wanted to go to art school, but my mum kept saying, well, you know, that's lovely, dear, but I really think you should get a proper job. And so by default, I ended up nursing because some friends had gone nursing. Ended up loving it, and you know, I became a nurse educator, and in those days they called them matron, so I was matron of a hospital for 6 years. But essentially I became burnt out. My second partner was from New Zealand. This is when I was still here. And he'd come over here to go on a working holiday, and at that point there was no way I was going to give up nursing, because I was going to be matron of a Sydney hospital. That was my next intention.
Right.
And he arrived, and I ended up surrendering all of that, and we went on a 5-year working holiday around Australia, and I experienced a better lifestyle, more available cash, and an incredible sense of well-being over those 5 years, just living in the moment, long before we were really talking about living in the moment.
Right.
And returned from that trip and just knew I could never go back. I'd experienced so much freedom that I could never go back to the constraints of nursing.
Right.
And so then I didn't have a clue what I wanted to do. So I did a range of things for a year, and we had filmed that 5 years, and nobody wanted to look at 30 hours of footage. So we went looking for someone to edit it. And editing back then was very prohibitive, very expensive.
Yeah.
And we thought, oh, there's probably a market for doing some domestic editing.
Mm-hmm.
And so we pursued that. My partner was an electronics technician. And we built up a small company, just working at part-time, putting old film and slides to video, doing this is your life kind of work. Then started filming events, then started filming for the news, then making ads for television. And that was like my art school. Here I got to have full creative expression, everything from, you know, making covers for videos to planning commercials, meeting people, interviewing people. It was amazing. I loved that job, loved that role, loved such diversity and full expression. And then, long story short, end of last century, sounds so long ago, doesn't it?
Sound like a dinosaur.
Yeah, a bit of a recession here in Australia, and the town I was living in at the time really was going down the gurgler. I think there were 19 businesses in the main street closed, and things were really tough.
Mm.
And ended up making the decision to go to New Zealand and start again. And that's really when just a whole series of events. I had cancer. When we first arrived over there, we owed $80,000. Ended up paying that back in 2 years. There's a book in that. If we could save $80,000 in 2 years, people would be very happy, I think.
Absolutely.
And I had 10 car accidents in the first 18 months that I was in New Zealand.
10?
Roughly every 6 weeks apart. None my fault, honest.
Really?
9 times I was collected in roundabouts by someone running up the back of me. And once I got collected, I got hit in in a roundabout. So I'm not sure what they were all about, but that it was certainly a bit of a nudge from the universe in one way or another. It feels like, do you get it? Do you get it yet? Oh, you still don't get it. And it was very much about pathway. At the end of, after we'd been here 2 years, repaid that money, my partner came home one day late, hadn't phoned, and as he walked in the back door, he said, I've just met a woman who's like no one else I've ever known before. And I think in that moment, I knew it was over.
Wow.
It was 6 months before he actually left. And, you know, that ranks up there as, you know, one of the most difficult times. I lost my first child, daughter. She was stillborn, and that was a big grieving process for me. She'd be 39 if she were here today. And, you know, journey through cancer, etc. But they all paled really to, you know, I never, because we worked and played together, so I never dreamed, never entered my mind that this was not going to last. And there were so many things happened that I thought meant this is forever.
Right.
And I still loved him. My heart still went pitter-patter, you know, when he would come in the driveway. And one of the things I talk about with my client is how we need to be so careful in how we couch our language. When we actually separated, some 6 months on from that evening, one of the things he said to me was, no, I don't love you, and I never loved you. And even now, as I share that with you, I feel that still.
That's like a double whammy, isn't it?
So, you know, was that the truth? Probably not, because we were together 20 years. But that sentence was actually a sentence for a shift in my life, because I thought, if that's true, what he just said, then everything I've ever known is not true. And so I disintegrated.
Absolutely.
And the reintegration over the next, that was 2001. So from there through to 2004 was a reintegration. And joyology came, an insight. I had been to a grieving seminar at Starship Hospital. There were 400 parents in the room who had lost or were losing children. I can imagine the energy in that room.
Oh my goodness.
And on that evening, there were I had a really defining moment. I sat next to one couple, and the lady just sat stock still and never moved the whole 2 hours. She just never shifted, hands on her knees. Her husband, who was immediately next to me, on the other hand, was very distressed. He would rock backwards and forwards. He'd be holding his arms. His jaw was clenching and unclenching. Periodically, tears would come to his eyes. And I felt his pain like I'd felt no one else's pain ever before. 16 years nursing, I saw a lot of stuff, and that was nothing compared to what I was feeling from this man. So I really get now that mirror thing we talk about, mirror neurons, and you know, what we're sensing is so true and so real.
Yeah. And
actually had a conversation with him afterwards, and he was the father of the young boy who fell to his death in the IMAX cinema in about 2000. He and his friends were just leaning on a balustrade, and he just toppled over backwards. There was a huge inquiry about it, with the balustrades, you know, questionably not being high enough. But he shared his story. He said, you've seen my wife. He said, she's been like that for 12 months. I can't reach her. there's 2 other children at home. He said, I'm a bloke. He said, I don't know how to deal with my own grief, let alone be the support for this. So we shared this amazing, intimate conversation. A total stranger. Amazing, intimate conversation. Had a hug, and both went our way. 2 hours later, I had a conversation with a magician in South Australia, a man by the name of Peter Salerno, who was inviting me to bring laughter workshops to New Zealand.
Right.
And it was in that conversation with him, there was just this little lull, a little quiet moment, and we're both just taking our breath, and it just came to me, oh my God, we've got radiology, pathology, hematology, but no joyology? I'm going to be a joyologist. And, you know, everything unfolded from that point. I had no idea what it was going to be. And, you know, appreciating now, it was over to me, and nothing changed, but everything changed.
Yeah.
You know, my core self hasn't altered from that time when I began nursing.
Yeah.
All the elements, you know, of the core of me were there then, but I was not conscious to them.
Yeah.
And so I developed my compassionate self. In the advertising area, I developed my creative self. I have this series of losses, which occurred over 4 years. And there were other things too. And they were the... when things happen in succession,
Yeah.
I remember thinking, if all of this is happening to me,
Yeah.
at some level, I must be really bad.
Right.
And some years on, you know, the hats I've been wearing when I speak, I got a new hat. And a friend said to me, oh, you can burn the old one now. And for some reason, I just got really upset. I started crying. And I thought, oh, what on earth is here? And when I took some time to reflect on that, I remembered at the age of 2 or 2.5, my mother stood me in front of the free-range fire, and I still had a dummy, and she threw my dummy in the fire. My little 2.5-year-old self thought, if my mum, who loves me, has just burnt my pipe, which is just like my Pop's pipe, Pop used to have a pipe, then I must be really bad. So this thing has been running through my life, and life events have been treated in that way. Like all these things that kept happening were, I thought, subtle reminders of just how bad I was, and that's why all these things were occurring, and not necessarily consciously.
I think that's the beauty of your story. You know, and it goes to show that you've been through so much pain again and again and again, and the roots of it are within the memory that you were not consciously aware of, and it stays in the cells of the body, all those memories. And I think one of the key things that I really, really want these interviews to come out of these interviews is to help increase people's awareness of what's around them, and to look back. And you won't necessarily get the answer in that moment, because it will come in divine timing, but it also helps you to open your eyes, take a wider perspective on it. I mean, you were talking there about the laughter yoga that you had, and right at the beginning of our conversation today, we were talking about children and laughter, and how cathartic that is, because they are in the moment. And you know, that's the whole point of having an organic conversation. It is amazing what comes out, and as you say, be careful of your words. pause. And in my own work, one I talk about the 4 levels, the spiritual, emotional, mental, and physical. I link them to connect, pause, engage, respond. And so they each relate to the 4 different parts of being whole. And it's so important. We're so busy, chop. We need to stop and breathe, take in what's around us and see it, and see there is, as you said earlier about going around the roundabout 9 times in the accidents, the thing that the picture that came up for me was you, and also the works that I've done with the horses, and my interview with Ian Benson the other day is like, we can't see things, we go round and round in circles doing the same things, and actually it's about being brave and stopping, stepping back and trying something else. Now, it could make matters worse, but at least you've changed the energy of it, and you then have that learning on board, and so you can try something else. It's stepping outside your comfort zone that's actually, as you say, really constrained you, didn't it?
Mm. Mm. Mm.
Fantastic. And I listened to your story in the video and things, and so it's a reflection of you're kind of coming back to yourself now, aren't you? Because you're doing work with the TV production.
Yes. It's really interesting. I don't know, it's probably been on a vision board since about 2006. One of my long-term goals is to produce humanitarian television. I didn't know exactly what form. I have one project for a children's television series, an animation, which is in process but fairly slow at this point. And then when I chose to come here, and I reflect on this 5-6 months, it's like, isn't that interesting? I didn't know that I was going to step almost straight away into an encounter with someone who's already producing television, and the way is just paved 1, 2, 3. Roger Hamilton talks about not paddling your own canoe, but joining up with a flotilla.
Yeah.
And you're all sailing in tandem.
Yeah.
And you're all in the stream together. You're creating a slip current for everybody else, and that's what's happened.
Collective energy, you cannot beat it. And I know for myself, one of the lessons I've learned, because I'm really pig-headed, I like to do things myself, but I'm also of a generation where you feel you had to do things on your own, otherwise the outside world would judge you of being incapable or something. And so slowly, as shit doesn't happen, it's like, oh, maybe if I ask and connect up with these people, and suddenly that ball gets rolling again. It's amazing, isn't it? And I hear in your own story, you kind of got out of your own way, because had you stayed in New Zealand, you'd have still been fairly stuck. It helped you to take a step back, prioritize what was important to you, and that was, getting back with family for your own well-being. And in the last 6 months, that has made a huge difference to you. And thank you, universe, for creating these opportunities, because you've actually listened to your inner guide.
Yeah. In the last 3 years, I studied NLP.
Yes.
And NLP Master Prac, and the new program, I think you might know of it, called M-Braining.
Yes.
Studying head, heart and gut brain. And my reason for wanting to do those was I wanted another level of languaging to be able to express my work even more fully. And what it enabled for me in a previous relationship, my partner had become an alcoholic and a gambler. And the last 3 years of that relationship became violent. And because I was matron of a hospital, nobody knew. I told no one about it. I was very ashamed and embarrassed that my relationship had come to that. And the last time I was beaten and raped. And when he was finished, he urinated on me. And I lay in the corner for 4 days before I got help, pretty much in a semi-coma. And it was 6 weeks before I told anybody, and I rang my mother and asked her to come. Didn't tell her the details on the phone. And Mum said, "Oh, well, this is very inconvenient, dear. We're going to your sister's today. Your sister's having her baby." And so I told no one. And I told no one for 30 years. And I attribute all that deeply hidden, compacted pain to be responsible for my need to have a hip replacement and for the subsequent journey through that dark night of the soul this last 12, 15 months. It was all about deeply embedded pain and my needing to go to, the bare bones of who I am, the truth of who I am. Those other events in the past were all external, and this last 12 months has been, as you said, it's been internal. Nobody else could do this, support this, really. I had some, physical help and healing, but only I could bring myself through it. And I have a saying, the only way out is through. And for me, this is joyful empowerment. There was probably 6 months last year where I could see no change. My hands were twice the size and couldn't move them, and all my other joints were the same, and nothing seemed to be shifting. I'd have a treatment and it might reduce for 2 or 3 days, but it was still there. And it was 6 months before I saw enough change to be able to go, right, now we're on to it. Now I can begin to really heal. And part of that healing was looking at things like boundaries, really re-establishing my values again, how I wanted to show up in the world and how I wanted to be treated, what I would tolerate no more. And, I really get a cellular level, I tolerated all of that pain before.
And you held on to it. One of the things that really strikes me is, you held on to it and didn't ask. And it's about self-love. It says self-love to me, because at the age of 2.5, you felt rejected. This is my interpretation, that you weren't lovable, that it was hard for you to love yourself. And it's in that process of loving yourself, you were looking for tangible results from your hands, but actually it's the intangible that is the thing that helps you move through the pain that you're talking about.
When I went nursing, the very first man I ever bed-bathed was a man by the name of Bob Ball. And a construction crane had fallen on Bob, and he was literally flattened. He arrived in casualty, and they pretty much went, "It's not going to make it." 3 or 4 hours passed, and he was still alive, and they decided, we'll risk taking him to theatre. But he'll probably be a vegetable. So he wakes up, or they are taking him back to recovery after the surgery. And the conversation then was, he'll probably be vegetable. So Bob woke up very quickly in recovery and revealed indeed he wasn't a vegetable. So at that point, the conversation changed, and they said he'll never walk again. Bob had 35 broken bones. He was in hospital the whole 3 years of my general nurse training. I saw Bob Hall every day, whether I was rostered on his ward or not. He went home for the odd weekend and little break. And Bob walked on 2 sticks to my graduation ceremony and stood up the back of the room. And when the ceremony was over, he waved one of those sticks and said, "I've actually got something to say." And I started to get a bit scared because I had no idea what it might be. And he came down the front, and my mother's sitting in the front row, and he had this big scroll, about 3 feet long. And he opened this scroll and he just started to read out all the different tricks and pranks that I had played on him over 3 years. I spent a lot of time in matron's office. I was in court. And every now and again my mother would say, "Oh, Tricia, you did it." And when he was finished, he turned to me and he said, "You don't know what you did." And I never really got that until 2001. 2001, with all those other losses and the journey forward, I really got what he was saying. I didn't know what I was doing then, but I was showing up in my full authenticity, my capacity to be good-humoured, to find fun even in the worst of situations, to create nonsense even at the risk of, I was appropriate and inappropriate.
I can assimilate with that one.
And I didn't really get it. Not really. So every time I give a keynote now, I usually have an empty chair. And that empty chair is the space for him, because he gave me a great gift. He said, "You don't know what you did." And he was right. I didn't.
He helped you see the gift within you, and again, it's that intangible, isn't it? It's so important. And I relate to the hats that you're talking about. We think the roles that we take in life personify who we are and what we're meant to be, but it's actually our character, the stuff we do naturally that really makes a difference. And you have to be someone else to see it, because it's hard to see for yourself. And then it's like I was talking to Senka the other day, and she was talking, about the sudden passing of her mother, and it was like a huge hole, and it inspired her with her Adventure Girls to live life fully, and to live your shit, as she calls it. And it's that dash in between that makes a difference. And it's actually about loving the shit out of yourself and living life fully, authentically. Yeah, definitely.
On the tour with Pat Adams, one of the things he said to me, we were sitting on the bus one day, and he said, "Pat, it's about the journey. Create for yourself a vision you can never hope to achieve, and then just set out and enjoy the journey."
Yeah, I can relate to that. I mean, again, one of my other guests, Philippa Roxlade, with her new book is Discovery, because it's about her own voyage of discovery. And then that's similar with me, with my great grandfather, whose book was actually called A Voyage of Discovery. And for me, having just been to the Antarctica and come back, it was almost like a rite of passage to help me rediscover, connect to nature, because for me and my work, it's about connecting to the essence of ourselves and nature, the world around us, so that we can actually find our place in it. And the way the world operates at the moment is that you have to be someone, you have to have a hat to put on to show up, to be of any value. But the value is in who you are, that inner light inside you, as you were saying. And every single person you talk to, everybody has different experiences, and that's what's so scrummy about these interviews, is drawing it out and helping other people actually see it for themselves.
You and I, at the end of last year, both met an extraordinary man, David Martin, I've interviewed in the documentary Future Dreaming. And, I think for myself, and probably for you too, for me, it just so affirmed along this, last 15 years or so, there've been a lot of naysayers, people saying, forget the joyology thing, nobody's getting it. Get rid of the hat, and you'll never get any work if your nails are painted like that. And David Martin and Kaya, the Kaya, the filmmaker, as much as David for me, just so affirmed all this new language that I'd created for myself, and the perfection of that path, and the requirement of it. It was needed. It is needed.
Absolutely. It's the grassroots something. I had an amazing epiphany then, but it's gone, so it's obviously not important. I won't go searching for it. Yes, because I really connected to the power within the film and what an impact the Antarctic had actually had on David Martin, and that's what came out. And obviously for you, from behind the lens as a production side of things with Kaya as well, and my little meeting with the penguin, again it was about standing out actually, because penguins do the counter shading things, and you're sitting on this rock 6:30 in the morning, and there's a colony of penguins, and so when they are up against the snow and the volcanic rock, you can't see them. But in order to be seen, you have to step out and show yourself. And so again, that's assimilation with nature. And he comes charging up to me and has this conversation. See, and I say I can speak penguin now, because there was like 30 seconds of this oneness. I really understood what he was saying. And you know, as you do, you talk back to them, and it was almost as if he was nodding and then got it, and off he went back to the colony again. And it was so profound. It's so hard to put into words, but again, it was about that counter shading thing. You've got to step out. If you're always in the limelight, eventually it gets so bright you can't be seen, and when you're in the dark, you need light to be seen. So the importance of the pain and pleasure is cyclic. It needs to go round, and it's not saying life's going to be, you know, fantastic. You're never always going to be in the moment, because energy shifts. It depends what's in us and around us that affects us, but it's having those conscious tools that helps us to recalibrate ourselves and bring us nearer and actually back to who we are. And there will always be lessons, but it's being able to manage those emotions and seeing the gift in them. I think that is the most important thing. And I think before we went online, you were talking about the gift in the pain. So what if you had a chance to give your childhood self a message? What would you tell her?
With you asking me about that before we I actually wrote myself a little letter, so I'm going to read it.
Oh, how lovely. Thank you.
So this is a letter to young Pat. If you remember nothing else, remember this. You are so meant to be here this lifetime. The world needs you and all who accompany you this lifetime. You are here to bring joy. You will be part of the awakening. There has never been a more important era to be born into. Your journey will be perfect, even though you may sometimes judge it differently. Never doubt your contribution to humanity.
Oh, thank you, Pat. That is absolutely beautiful and really sums it up. And an absolute blessing to everybody who's listening in. Thank you very much for your gift. It's been a delight to be with you. And I hope to pop across the water and come and visit you very, very soon. Mwah! Big hugs. Okay. And thank you for your being present in all our lives.
Yeah. Talk again.